4, we are discussing Wicked. We are comparing the book and the musical. Let's go. Alright, so we have, I do want to start this section off by mentioning that this section of the book especially is really heavy. We're going to be discussing some pretty explicit instances of violence. So just so you know. So Fiyero is in the Emerald City doing miscellaneous prince stuff. He runs into Elphaba, who no one has heard from for the last 5 years. What starts out as Elphaba begrudgingly like, alright, we can catch up for 5 minutes, but I'm busy, turns into a months-long love affair. And I do specifically say affair because Fiyero is married. He was married pretty young because politics, that's how things are done in the Vinkus. My dog. He's married pretty young because that's just how things are done in the Vinkus, especially when you're royalty. It was a political marriage, so he has a wife and 3 children who live back in the Vinkus in a castle called Kiamo Ko. So Fiyero lives a very privileged life. He is very apathetic. He genuinely doesn't really think about politics outside of when he's doing, like, his miscellaneous prince duties, which is, like, he makes appearances at, like, dinners and stuff. Like, he is not a serious politician. He is just kind of there to show his face. Elphaba, meanwhile, has joined a terror cell. It's very mysterious. It's all smoke and mirrors. She purposefully doesn't tell him a lot about it because it's not safe. Elphaba is... I love her so much. She's a very difficult person. But she really does adore him. Their story is very sweet. It's very tragic. So Fiyero actually does start feeling guilty for being so politically uninvolved. And the crux of this is one day he's in a restaurant, and he looks out the window and he sees this weird big building that has damage to one of the walls. And through this damage, he can see what looks like a large prison. He sees a bear family, capital B, bear, so they're sentient, and a large group of quadlings who are being held there, guarded by soldiers. He sees one of the soldiers use their gun to bash the baby bear in the head. This understandably rattles him, but he feels helpless to do anything. Now, Elphaba doesn't really talk about her work a lot, but she does admit to a few things. They're an anonymous cell. They use magic to conceal their appearances. Their eventual goal is to kill the wizard. But she says that she will not have a direct hand in that because she's too ostentatious. Like, she's bright green. She walks in a room and everyone's looking at her. On Lurlamus Eve, which is the pagan holiday, Elphaba is working. Fiyero has a bad feeling about it, and he decides to tail her. He follows her all the way to the city square, where he sees Madame Morrible about to give a speech in front of a new theater that's being opened. He thinks he sees Elphaba readying a weapon, and it all clicks. She's going to kill Madame Morrible. Remember, we know that Madame Morrible is a collaborator. It's one of those things where it's like, we can't 100% prove it, but we know. She tried to hypnotize Elphaba and the other girls to, manipulate them into also becoming collaborators. And Elphaba is the perfect candidate to carry out this assassination, because if she gets caught, she's just an insane former student who held a grudge. Everybody knew that Elphaba fucking hated Madame Morrible. So she's the perfect person to be carrying out this assassination. But just then, the school on the other side of the square lets out. Suddenly, there are 100 little girls between Elphaba and her target. Elphaba is obviously confused and distressed. It's a holiday. They probably didn't know that the school was going to be open. Madame Morrible finishes her speech and goes inside. Elphaba fails to complete her mission. Fiyero goes back to Elphaba's apartment to wait for her. You know what's coming now. A bunch of soldiers break down the door. They beat the shit out of him, and Fiyero loses consciousness. When this happens, the POV shifts to a nun in a nearby convent. In this universe, they're called Maunts. M-A-U-N-T-S. Maunts. I've never been sure how to say that. So she's very annoyed when somebody rings the bell. It's Lurlamus Eve. The service is about to start. She's like, come on. She opens the door to find a green woman whose hands are covered in blood. She is in obvious shock and is unable to speak. The Mont gets her cleaned up and basically, like, dumps her in the old people room for safekeeping so she can go back to the service. So she leaves Elphaba alone there, and this is a room of very elderly people. Nobody really notices her, except for one woman, Mother Yakel, who scoots her wheelchair over to Elphaba and holds her hand. Alright, let's move to the musical. We jump right back into the musical with propaganda. Madame Morrible is the wizard's press secretary, basically, and Glinda is a public figure who works closely with her. The second act starts with them giving a press conference on the Wicked Witch. The public despises Elphaba. The conference then turns into a surprise engagement celebration, which is a big surprise to Fiyero, who didn't know he was getting engaged. But he's a very good sport about it. He is the captain of the guard and ostensibly in charge of the search for Elphaba. Privately, he and Glinda fight about the propaganda that she is spreading about Elphaba, like she's her friend, why is Glinda doing this? He calls her out on her selfishness. She has positioned herself as Glinda the Good at the expense of the truth, even though she tries to claim that she's helping people by making them feel better. It's a pretty thin lie. She doesn't even seem to believe it. So let's compare. As you can see, the musical is a lot more vague about Elphaba's politics. We haven't really touched on them a lot yet. This section focuses more on Glinda and Fiyero. In my opinion, this helps to make the story more palatable. A lot of the changes that you see from the book to the musical are for that purpose, to make it more palatable. And that can be a good thing, because a more palatable story will reach a wider audience. But it can also be negative, because a lot of important points are missed. They're hard. A lot of parts of this book are very hard. But they're so important, and it makes me sad that they're missed. The musical makes a lot of really good points about propaganda, showing how easily it can be spread by a beautiful smiling face. It demonstrates the pressures people feel to maintain the status quo. Glinda does feel bad about what she's doing, but she lets Madame Morrible pressure her into playing her role. She really is very selfish. She doesn't want to let go of this life. The song, Thank Goodness, is on the surface about being grateful, but when you read between the lines, it's also Glinda mourning the things that she has lost to get where she is. She has this fantastic life, she's rich, she's privileged, her job is to look pretty and to make speeches, but she has lost her best friend, her romantic relationship is fraught, and she's lost her self-respect. I think this is really comparable to the book's discussions of apathy, and I really like that because I think it's important. These parts focus on different characters, like in the book, Glinda isn't in this section at all, but we're making similar points about apathy and about people choosing not to act. This section of the book is incredibly heavy. I'm not gonna lie, it is. We really see Fiyero lose his innocence when he witnesses these acts of violence that he is powerless to stop. We also get the theme of hopeless causes, again. So Elphaba does not achieve her goal of killing Madame Morrible. Her lover is killed in the crossfire. That detention center is still operating in the middle of the city. They are nowhere closer to killing the wizard, and nobody gives a damn. In the next section, we really see Elphaba's journey paralleling her parents in a heartbreaking cycle. It's really beautiful. It's really meaningful. I'll catch you then.